Hello everyone, I'm Annie Gibbins and you're listening to Memoirs of Successful Women, the podcast where you get to hear candid conversations with fascinating women from around the globe who share aspects of their business and life journey, how they measure their success and what they have learnt along the way. Hello and welcome to Memoirs of Successful Women. Today I am introducing you to Phoenix Mendelsohn from Phoenix Ignited. We're going to be talking about all things feminine, getting ourselves feminine from the bedroom to the boardroom. Let's say it like that. So Phoenix has had a decade of global management consulting. She then had a moment where she got back into reclaiming her own sexuality, exploring plant-based medicines and feminine mystery schools, giving her a unique view on sex, truth, and power. So this episode is going to be a little bit raunchy, and I absolutely love it. So welcome to the program, Phoenix.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here, Annie. I love the chats that you do. I think they're very powerful conversations.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I'm sure this one is going to be just as powerful. So let's just dive right into it. Why do you think women have lost their sense of, inner love of who they are, the essence of who they are? Sometimes we can concentrate so much on the doing, on the achieving, and then actually sort of feel that we're not so connected to that inner fire. Tell me all about that. Why is this your passion area?
That's such a beautiful question, and there's quite a few threads to that. And let's start with the traditional one. So I love what you touched on as well around being that we often get caught up in the doing. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the way our system and our culture puts values on what happens in life at the moment is very much on the doing. Mm. In fact, I heard the funniest quote earlier today. I was listening to Kasha, who's written a book on unleashing power for women. It's called Unbound, and she was saying we live in a really bizarre culture, especially in America, but it's in a lot of the Western cultures where empaths envy sociopaths.
Yeah. Okay.
And we kind of disconnected from that sense of emotions as being really powerful and that being states of being really powerful. So what she's talking about there is a lot of the time we're looking outwards, and often in social media, a lot of that is outwards as well. It's like, what are we doing? What are we achieving? What is the success that we're reaching for in our lives? What is the milestone that we're after? And we're kind of on this wheel of chasing, and we don't pause and take a breath and notice what that chasing is doing to us. And that's what you're talking about around, well, if we've disconnected from ourselves and our bodies and our feeling, it's not really that surprising that life doesn't have as much fire as it used to, or the fire is only one type. And so this can often come, for example, if we're in the doing in work, if we're in the doing in corporate, and we have a lot of fire there, but then we come home and we want to be in relationships and we want to have the softer side, like swapping between them is really hard. And part of that is because we aren't taught to value the softer pieces and the more empath sides of ourselves. And as women, we're often told that it's dangerous to go there, like to be taken seriously at work, to be taken seriously, we need to be doing things and we need to be showing our logic. And as a result, we let go of some of these really important parts of ourselves, or we vilify them. And so that's often where a lot of that mental chatter that comes in. Like we get a lot of that noise that's kind of always telling us what to do, what we did wrong. Sometimes we speak to ourselves in like really mean ways. You pay attention to those voices sometimes, and it's often because of that, where we're putting on ourselves the values and rules of society instead of allowing ourselves to be in the fullness of who we are.
Yeah. Oh, you have articulated that so beautifully, and I relate to so many aspects of that. Being a C-suite businesswoman, I've had those sorts of comments to me. It's like, oh, okay, that's really surprising. You're so, so feminine. I still wear dresses all the time, and I haven't done the grey trouser sort of ensembles, or that I'm very touchy-feely, friendly, sort of, very comfortable with my feminine side, but to the point that it's unusual, and that's been a point to get to in my sort of stage of going, no, this is who I am. This is the essence of who I am. And I actually want to bring that into my work, but also bring that even stronger side into my own life, my own relationships, and then I can also bring those energies that come from work into my household as well, that it doesn't have to be all mumsy, feminine, girly, stuff. So it's getting that balance right. But what we're talking about today is very much that we can be so driven and so focused on all of those things that society values, what your title, even the way we're introduced, the CEO of this, the leader of that, and we can be so focused on that or, what we're achieving, that the essence behind why we're achieving those things, even our that purpose, that passion can get lost because of the outcome focus rather than the reason to be. And then from a sensual perspective, even to be the true version of who we are in the areas that matter, which is to ourselves and definitely with our partner.
Absolutely. Yeah, I deeply feel what you're saying.
So how do you help, particularly women, take a breath, take some time out, and to start sort of igniting, to recapturing who they truly are?
Mm-hmm. The way that I work is I do a lot of deep feminine work. And so I talk about the dark a lot. And at first people are like, oh, that doesn't sound like, what do you mean? That sounds like I don't really want to go to the dark.
That's right. I only want the light.
Yes, isn't that the opposite of what we're meant to do? And the reason that I like to talk about that is especially if we're in a space of achieving and we're oriented towards the outwards. When we look at, and I loved what you were talking about before as well around balance and about fluidity and having, ultimately this comes down to the capacity to be whichever of those parts you desire to be in that moment. Mm-hmm. And you can have each of them in corporate space. You can bring the feminine when that is in the right moment, and in the home you want to bring your masculine when that's the right moment, or the fierce feminine, because
let's just tap into that word then. What is the fierce feminine?
That's the part that won't take bullshit. It can see manipulation, it can see crossings of boundaries. It's most commonly talked about when it's like the woman who lifts the car of her child, who normally would never have that level of strength, but because her child is at risk, she's drawing resources from places that you wouldn't otherwise ever have access to. But we can use that in service of ourselves as well. Yeah. It's the deeper, really strong part of the feminine that sometimes gets overlooked.
Well, I've got a different name for it in my household. One of my sons calls me a dragon, and when I went, why do you call me a dragon? Like, it sounds really terrible, right? Like, imagine that. Initially, I was like offended, and he goes, "No way, Mum. Dragons are awesome. Like, they go to the death to fight for their young, to fight for, like." I had to actually watch How to Train Your Dragon to get the gist of what he was saying. And I went, yeah, that's right. Like, I am total, protector, nurturer, don't mess with my family, don't mess with my kids, because they're your heart and soul, right? So that's just a fascinating different way of interpreting that. What does that actually mean? So why we therefore can do that with those that we love, you suddenly entered our protector mode. Why then so challenging for us to then not do that for ourselves? Why are we on fire for protecting ourselves, and also not just protecting ourselves, nurturing ourselves?
Oh, that's such a good question. We'll get a little, so I'm going to use a word that's a little political, and then we'll unpack it from there. So a lot of it is cultural, a lot of it is values, and it's about patriarchy. And if you look at what patriarchy means, this at no point is about vilifying men. It's just the power structure, and they happen to be at the top in that power structure. And as part of that, the way that gets set up is women are vessels and women are of service. And so we have a very long line in time of things being passed down where our value was in the home, it was in invisible labor, it was in giving of ourself, it was in being that kind of good girl and that young sort of beautiful aspect, and we actually lose our power as we get older, and that we couldn't provide or protect for ourselves. We were required to, there have been periods in history where women weren't even allowed to own property. Like if we inherited, it passed on to our husbands or whomever was the closest male relative. And it's just, there's still a legacy of that. And I touch on that point where, for example, your son said to you that he sees you as a dragon, and you're like, oh, I'm not sure about that. Is that a good thing? Because as women, that isn't a typical thing that we would put on and feel comfortable with, like being fierce. It previously, you could actually be put in an asylum for having too much will.
Absolutely. So you are automatically a witch because you're either a witch or you're mad because, historically, because you're actually bucking the trend of what society said at that time was the norm. And that was that you shouldn't have a voice, and you certainly don't have, position to challenge those in authority, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Because if we did, then the system would collapse, and we're just dealing with the legacy of that. And I think it's really important these days to have a lot of empathy for ourselves on the way through, and on the women around us and the men who are also a bit confused about what's happening, because they also aren't quite sure. They want to protect and provide for us, but they also want to allow us to protect and provide for ourselves. And everyone's a little confused about where that right balance sits. And one of the things I like to talk about when I talk about kind of the version of feminism that we're in right now is that the women who came before us did the really important part of fighting for equality. But now that puts us in the position where we're so blessed that we get to look at what does that mean? So, okay, we now have the opportunity to be have our own money. We have the opportunity to go and come to the highest echelons of business and society. But do we want to come in and just fit into society the way it is? Or do we want to come in and say, well, now we're at the table, real diversity means that we're bringing differing perspectives. Real diversity means that we bring the masculine and the feminine in, and we value them both, and we use each when it's necessary.
Exactly. I think those before us, and currently even in the world I live in, you've been wanting permission to be at the table. Now the shift is that I'm expecting to be at the table. In fact, I'm preparing myself that I'm already there, and so I'm waiting for you to arrive, so that we can have discussions that matter, so that we can actually, be of equal value, not that women are trying to be positioning themselves above. We're actually just saying we're all here as equal partners to share, have progressive thoughts, to be involved in impactful change, right? It's about that. All right. Absolutely. Let's go back to the feminine then, and the work that you do and you talk about definitely in the services that you do and on your website and what you're passionate about. I'm going to propose to you. Do you feel that a woman who is very comfortable with the essence of who they are, loving themselves wholly, being in intimate relationships that are, supportive of the essence of who they are and being able to express themselves in that way, do you feel that those women are positioned to be more impactful leaders and members of society?
I absolutely do. And one of the reasons that I feel that is often so actually I'll touch on two things. As a leader, there's two really important pieces that we have. One is the ability to enroll other people in our vision and to bring people in. There's a lot of empathy involved in that. And there's a lot of the softer side of the feminine that can be really powerful in bringing that. It's like when you meet people who are magnetizing and are charismatic and they have presence, that's someone who's fully embodied and fully in their own essence. And you can feel it, and you can feel their vision. You can feel that there's someone that you can come into their sphere and you will be better because of it, or you will be able to experience your own, more of your own essence in their presence, because it's an expansive vision.
Yeah, I love that. The way I sort of phrase it is, while I'm in a state of fear of, what other people might think, fear of failure, fear of being embarrassed, fear of, even what if I did become who I am actually supposed to, what would that even mean? If I'm a state of fear or resistance or reluctance to, appreciate, nurture and value the essence of who I am, and for every other woman that I coach, for them, then when you're in fear, you are like a sheep. Right? You're always waiting for permission, whether, the girls who are little girls waiting to be told, sitting there being good until we're told to do an act of service or something for someone else, whereas when we're actually moved away from that, we overcome the fear, and you then become the lioness, right? You then have the ability to go, I have no fear. I'm actually empowered. I can sit above the situation, I can read it, and I can then tap into the nurturing side, that loving side, that empathetic side, that presence that then can be equally impactful, strong, courageous. Right, which is that vision. So that's what it means to me. It's like changing from a sheep to a lioness in my interpretation. I think that's really important for the listeners listening in. What does this kind of concept mean to you? Are you listening to this conversation and thinking, yeah, do I step back into my life and think, yeah, well, who am I? Who is the essence of who I am? Do I love myself in the right way? Not in a nauseating way, but in a way of, yes, I love the person that I was born to be. I'm actually nurturing that person, loving that person, getting in touch with all of your quirky, beautiful, spunky, crazy, feminine ways, right? Because we're all, individual, authentic, and we're not everyone's cup of tea, and that's all right, but are you spending time to actually focus on your essence? Because I totally agree, Phoenix. I totally agree that, in my world, I'm also the CEO of an eye health charity. That's exactly what I do. When I'm out there professionally, it's important that I have that feminine side. I say to people, can you partner with me to help people save sight in this nation? These things are not okay. These, people are suffering. They are, unnecessarily, they've got these issues. And I want to bring that full energy of who I am, rather than, it's a process, it's a position, it's just a policy, it's just a strategy, because people can tell the difference. People can tell the difference when you're authentically who you are to when you're actually just in a position. In and out of the boardroom, in your own home. How many times are people there, but they're not fully present because they're trying to be, they're thinking of when they're going to be okay, when they're going to be good enough, when they should be doing things for other people, rather than seeing the blessing that is right there in that moment. Tell me why you went, ooh.
Presence is the ultimate gift. Like deep down, we just really want to be seen. and to sit in that space where we're both connected. Like there's something that the human soul craves in connection. It's being able to love and be okay whilst we're alone, but then when we're also with someone, like knowing how to dial in and to really be in each other's presence. It's like the couples who have been together for so long, they no longer need words. They're just in love.
How can you then tap into that dream relationship love and then actually feel strong enough to feel that you're okay even without the partner who can then give you that?
Ooh, this is such an interesting question. I love that one because it's a little bit counterintuitive.
Yeah.
So the piece, I like the concept that Tantra brings, which is that we're all come into this world as whole beings, and then as we go through, different things happen. Like we forget who we really are. We forget our own divinity, and conditioning and trauma and all sorts of stuff comes on. And one of the most beautiful things that we can do for ourselves is to sit and allow ourselves to peel back the layers, and really deeply connect with who we are. And the more that we can give ourselves that love, the more we begin to be able to love other people. And one of the reasons for that is we often have this there are parts of us that have so much need that no one else can fill them. It's like these parts that are just in pain or just want to be, maybe it was because there was an abandonment issue when you were young, or maybe it's because there was a form of rejection. Like there'll be some core wounding, and that is something that no one else can heal for us. We actually need to look at that and pour love into that space. And by doing that, we tap back into the infinite essence. And then we don't need another person. We get to be with another person. So it's like we've filled our own cup, and then we're overflowing with other people. And if we're able to find that space, that's the real juice.
It is definitely the real juice. Oh my gosh, these are gold nuggets for those listening in. I often have those conversations with my husband, and we've been married 34 years next week, actually. And still totally in love, which is absolutely the biggest blessing in life. But what we often have discussions about is our marriage journey has been about making sure that we support each other to be the best version of ourselves, because that's where you get those couples that you've got the synergy. That's that X factor when you go, and they're a rarity, unfortunately, in society. But when you meet people and they just go, oh my gosh, you guys have got the spark, you guys have got the love. Now they're not looking at you as the two of you; they're actually looking at that some of the parts, and then getting that synergy, because you do not just think for each other and do those sorts of things that people think. It's actually the opposite. It's those people who go, oh, you've just become one, so you probably think the same, do the same. Actually not. In our relationship that has got stronger and stronger and stronger over the years, the reason that it actually has, and it started off pretty fab, was because we've become actually better individuals, which has helped us become a stronger couple. But what I mean by that is because we've been focused on how can I bring out the very best in you, that you've actually encouraged the strengthening, the ownership, the authenticity in each other, which, is opposite to the coupley stuff that therefore makes you do everything, together. And then I remember when we were first married, I kind of was so overexcited that, we're there and I got this amazing guy to, and all that sort of stuff, that I wanted to, be the pleaser, not do anything wrong, these kind of that insecurity, almost like I can't believe he picked me kind of thing. I was only 20. And then, suddenly when you go into that stage of no, I am enough. I was already enough. That's right. You're now two individuals that, that I'm enough on my own. And because that is valued and I value it myself, and the same for him, then you end up getting that relationship that has synergy, has spark, and is actually long lasting, because you're not depending on each other. You're actually appreciating each other. You're having gratitude for them, So if I actually take that sort of thinking into the discussion that we're having now, that's exactly it. It's actually growing yourself individually to go, I need to go right to my core, and yes, and actually spend that self-discovery time. And that's what it is, time out to actually make this a priority. How easy it is. I don't know, you had a career journey as well, in corporate, that you can just be so on the move that the thought of taking time out for yourself, self-discovery, who am I becoming? You can be so busy being and growing and contributing and just being on someone else's path, which is kind of your path as well, without taking stock to think, that's right, what is the essence of me? I've got so many people who come to me for coaching who just go, I actually don't even know who I am.
So common.
And it's because of stages of transition, right? Sometimes it's it might be the 20-year-old who, I don't know who I am yet. How does someone actually know that? And you go, well, you do life and you lean into it, and then you experience and grow. But often it's because I'm now a mum. What does that mean? I'm now a wife. What does that mean? My kids have now left school after 20 years of being their mum. Who am I? I don't even know now. These kind of things. This is actually very common and very normal. Because and the conversation we're having, there's no guilt on that. Like, we all do it. We all get lost in the system, the treadmill, the mechanics of life, without appreciating the need. So I think it actually comes to what do we value, doesn't it? Tell me a little bit about how you feel about that statement. What do you value? Do people, particularly women, we're talking about women, do they truly value the importance of actually focusing on their own feminine self and therefore power?
It's a really interesting question. The reason I'm hesitating a little on this is because I think one of the challenges we are often given is that we're not given that as an intrinsic value originally. Like, it's often not part of the values, the coding that we pick up. And so oftentimes we have to, it'll be a trigger. So I loved what you were talking about around points of transition. And it could also just be like a building unease that there's something kind of wrong. And in those spaces, that's often, I think, when we pause and we take stock and we go, my life is not turning out the way I thought it would, or something just, I'm chasing these things and it's not feeling the way it was meant to, like something's broken. And I think it's often in those moments that we realize we need to start looking at it differently. And that's where the value that you're talking about comes in, as we go, oh, like, I can stay on this ride and keep going and just always feel like there's something missing, and that's a choice that I can make. Or I can make the choice to sit down and go, I'm going to find this peace, and it's not in the places I've been looking before. Where do I need to start looking now? Like, my journey, when I found that, personal development was not really a space that I thought I would get into. Like, a lot of the areas that I now spend a lot of my time thinking about would have been back then, like, you're doing what? Like,
that's so unlike
what do you mean? Exactly, which is a beautiful touch on identity as well. It's like we have the power to shift our identity, and it's a question of what do we choose? What is serving us? And so when I started going into that space, like, I was quite concerned, as like, these people just sound like they're quacks. Like, where's the science?
I love that. I love that. That is so true.
But it was, my soul was telling me, that I had to find something else, and the places I was currently looking weren't enough. And that's where I also like to talk a little bit about the difference between the value system embedded in masculine and feminine. And in the masculine, we're valuing logic, we're valuing words, we're valuing verbal communication, we're valuing rational thinking, we're valuing the tangible, which are essential, very core components to our society and our ability to it's what allows us to make moves in the physical world.
Yeah.
And in the feminine, you have what's unseen. What is the undercurrents? What are the whispers? What is intuition telling you? What are your emotions telling you? It's those deeper spaces. It's the inward realm as opposed to the outward realm. It's the communication that we do, as we were talking about before, when we're in each other's presence.
I think that's so true. Like, I even look at, the default behaviors of, I've got 3 boys and 2 girls, and that's, it's so easy to go, when the boys were little, it's so easy to go, you're so strong and you're so smart. And then it's easy to then go to the girls, you're so pretty, you're so helpful, you're so, do you know what I mean? Like, it's amazing that these default, stereotypes actually come through because that's the way we were referred to. And therefore it sort of just gets absorbed that is the way. Whereas if you actually, that's right, and I've been, because of my awareness with that, when I was raising my kids, I'm like saying to the girls, you are so capable. You're going to be a world leader. You're going to be, a change agent. You're going to make amazing things happen, to actually start getting that into the conversation that it shouldn't be. We've actually got I believe a baton to pass on to this next generation, that they then do actually think, yeah, of course I can make things happen, because I should be at that table and I should have a voice, because that is actually the essence of who I am. But it requires awareness. It requires an awareness that this is the way we automatically speak, because that's, people will respond based on the years and years of those seeds of, well, this is therefore who I am. Whereas it's not, it's actually just a framework that other people have put on you, and therefore you take that as a truth.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. And in fact, one of the reasons that I love exploring the deep feminine, going inward and going into the psyche, is because we uncover what is the truth that is there, and you can unpack and identify and release all of the conditioning, and you come down to what is your core truth, and those are your core essences, and everybody's is a little bit different. That's what I think is so beautiful as well. Like, each of us comes into the world with a slightly different patterning or soul or essence. And when we go in and we shed the pieces, we're able to look at the conditioning that we have, and we can let it go. We come down to that place.
Yeah.
One of the most beautiful stories I've heard to explain this, actually, is also the difference between the survival game and the thriving game. And that when we're younger, it's so giving the analogy of in the World War, when Japan lost, there was a lot of soldiers that were out on, like, in remote places or on islands, and even 10 to 15 years later, they were finding them and bringing them back home. And they said they'd approach these people very carefully, because they still thought the war was going on.
Yeah.
And when they'd bring them home, they would celebrate them and say thank you for your service, and allow them to then reintegrate into the community. And we need to do that for parts of ourselves as well, because when we grow up, we often have what we call survival games. So maybe in your family, your girls, I love it, we're absolutely able to achieve, but in other families, or in any family, there's always a survival game, because we're dependent on our parents. And so we can't live our fullest self to our fullest capacity, because we're still growing. And so those are the pieces that we often need to look at and thank and release as we become adults. And so it doesn't mean that it was necessarily any trauma there or anything bad happened. It just means that we've outgrown something. But because we don't look within, we don't realize that these soldiers are still there fighting a war that's finished.
That is such a great visual. I absolutely love it. That's it. Because that is the person listening in now going, oh my gosh, I'm 30 and I'm still acting in myself the way I was raised, which is, nothing wrong with that, but it might have been the way your parents believed about things, or just a story that you were told, sometimes even because they've got a number of kids and you've just got to sort of go with the commonality to then make sure that we all stay happy and healthy and don't fight as much. There's so many factors that we don't have time to unpack today, but that's it. You suddenly haven't had that time to go, okay, well, I'm not a kid. I'm an adult, and to be an empowered adult, to be an authentic adult, I actually have to then strip back, and challenge all of those messages that I was told. And many of them will be great, and that's wonderful. And others actually don't serve you well. They're 10 years ago. They're actually not going to work for where you are now, because that war, that stage, that time is over. Or it was someone else's journey, and you're in someone else's story, and now you're creating your own story.
Yeah. And I love that you touched on that, because that's one piece that I'm really, really big about. I think the world right now needs new stories, and it's up to us to spin them. And the question is, where do they come from? And my answer to that is, that's what going into the deep is for. It's when you see your own truths inside and you start to live them, you are creating a new story. And that is creating something for all of the women and all of the men around you that hasn't been there before.
Absolutely fantastic. I am loving our conversation, but time is fleeting. We could chat all day. How do people find you, Phoenix? How do they get in touch with you? And when they do, what are they going to receive?
I can be found in a couple of places. So if you would like to check out, learn a little bit about what I do, that is www.phoenixignited.com. And on there, people can download the Dark Elixir. So what we were talking about, the dark is just going into that deep feminine. So it's that inner darkness. Just because you're closing your eyes, you're going into yourself and you're finding yourself. And so the Dark Elixir is your opportunity. It's a guided activation. So you can download it. You can drop into your space and allow it to help you connect. So that's a beautiful gift that's on there.
Oh, that sounds absolutely awesome. I think I'll have one of those today. Who doesn't want a bit of a dark elixir? To actually just go, yes, just really center and get in touch with yourself. I think that is wonderful. And you're a woman who's already started with a gift. And definitely everyone check out Phoenix Ignited. I will have all your details on my podcast platform and also my YouTube channel. Definitely check out Phoenix. She has just got so much value to give you, so much, knowledge and deep understanding of why this is important. This is why it's important to women to actually really not just, know themselves, own themselves, but to actually start loving yourself, to start getting comfortable with, your identity, who you are, and the value that, I agree with you. You said that before, that everyone's sort of, pretty much is born for a reason. I totally believe that. Every soul that's born onto this planet is unique and needs to be, valued and loved. And it starts that by doing it yourself, because how can you actually love others, people, passion, projects, jobs, and other things if you don't start with your core? Which is the essence of you. So thank you so much for being on my program today. I've absolutely loved our conversation. And ladies listening in, catch up with Phoenix and really start exploding the essence of who you are.
I appreciate that hearing that from you. Thank you. That means a lot.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Memoirs of Successful Women. You can find me at anniegibbins.com, where you can download my free resources, get connected on social, and check out my online magic transformation program. If you love this show, feel free to subscribe to future episodes and, of course, share it with your friends. I'll see you again soon, and until then, happy podcasting.